Welcome to the Voyager podcast, hosted by Chris Fick and Brad Alexander. We're a weekly show about authentic faith in unlikely places. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We hope you're encouraged. All right, welcome back to the Voyager podcast. My name's Brad Alexander. I'm here with Chris Fick.
Hi. So we do this every time.
I know, where our intros are just killing it. And today we have a very special guest I'm super excited about. Chris, you go way back with him, so I'm going to let you do a little introduction.
Yes, my good friend and one of the men that stood with me at my wedding, Tommy Green, the one and only Tommy Green. So you guys don't know Tommy. If you're part of the hardcore scene, you do. Tommy was he was a vocalist, lead singer of Sleeping Giant, and is right now doing Holy Name he's a movie star. He runs a nonprofit called Run Against Traffic, and he is most importantly from Salt Lake City. No,
yeah,
that's right.
Give it up.
So, yeah, welcome, Tommy. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I'm really, really grateful to be with you.
The holy name drop that just went out, too, if anyone's listening that hasn't caught that, it's real heavy, but I encourage people, check it out. It just came out. It's good. A lot of guest features on there, too, which has been cool.
Absolutely. I just don't want to yell and scream anymore. And so the music is so, like you said, it's so heavy and like driving that I was like, it needs intensity, but that's just not me. So whenever I felt like I wanted something heavy to be happening, I just called a friend and said, will you yell? And they said, we will yell. And I said, cool. I will stand here and sing like an emo weirdo and just try not to cry, which is good.
It's White Flag. It's going back to White Flag. That was the... Yeah, I remember, man. No, I love it because I feel like Holy Name is like so you. It's like a perfect persona of like, this is Tommy. It's like you see the hardcore side. And we were in Death Star together, original Death Star members, and your vocals were just so heavy. But then there's also the side. White Flag was like your little side project thing that's what Tommy is too, a poet. And
Was Tommy in Death Star the whole time?
So me and Chris did the demo, and then we were in the band. Chris dipped to go become a pastor extraordinaire, and then because he was in Bible college at that point, and then I stayed with him we did a couple tours. I put out a record with them, and then that was kind of when I had started Bible study at that point that had turned into kind of our first like little church community. And I was like a dad at that point. My daughter, Marin, I think was like 2 or 3. And so I was just like single dad being a pastor guy in the hardcore scene. And so I dipped out of Death Star. So I was there for the demo and the first record. And then I think their best record is called We Are the Threat. And I was not in the band during that one, but it's one of my favorite records. So We Are the Threat. I was around. I hung out in the studio with them the whole time because SG was recording our first record at that point, kind of in the similar season. And I got to do gang vocals, I think, and guest vocals on that record, but I wasn't a part of the band. Eric would kind of have me in the wings to like help out if we needed it, but they didn't need it. They did an amazing job. You did the tour too, Chris. Were you
That's
in
when
the
I
band?
Left. Yeah.
You left when we did the tour with Atreyu and Under Oath and God Forbid, right?
Yeah, I had left right before one of those tours.
Okay.
That was like, because we had mission trips I had signed up for. And so we were going to Mexico. I actually talked about this last episode, but like, that was kind of like, God was like, you're going to do ministry now, like full on. And yeah.
Well, before all that, let's take a step back. So Tommy, can we kind of dive into your backstory and can you tell us about like just growing up, because you grew up in Salt Lake City, right?
No, I grew up all over the place, but I landed in Salt Lake in high school. And so I learned to drive out here. I kind of grew into the music scene out here. And so I lived a bunch of different places when I was growing up with my family, but I landed in Salt Lake, I think at that real, kind of becoming your own human kind of time. And so I was here 10th grade through a little bit of college. And then me and my ex-wife and my daughter moved to Redlands in 2002. And so anyway, so I consider myself kind of like from Salt Lake, but I'm from all over. So yes, I'm happy to say whatever. What do you want to know? What do you want to know? Where should we start?
No, we always say that. I'm like, where you identify being from is usually where you went to high school. That's usually like where you're like, this is where I planted my roots and this is where it formed me. Growing up, were you like involved in the punk scene? Did you get into the hardcore scene pretty early on? What kind of influences? Was there any God in your family? Was there any talk of God?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, that's cool. I grew up in my family. My mom and my dad got divorced, I think, when I was like 3 or 4. I was born in San Francisco. My mom and my dad were born and raised in the Bay Area. They got married, super young. They had me, I think my mom was 17. And my dad and my mom and I moved to St. Louis with the railroad. My dad worked for Union Pacific Railroad. And so my mom and my dad got split up when I was, I think, 3 or 4. My mom moved back to the Bay Area with me. My dad stayed in St. Louis. And so most of my childhood years up through maybe my 8th or 9th grade year, each summer, I'd be with my mom and my mom and my stepdad during the year. And then I would go visit my dad and my stepmom in the summers. My dad stayed in St. Louis until he got a job driving the train as an engineer in 1993 or 94 and moved to Salt Lake City because I had a hub here. And then as the weirdest twist of fate is that my mom and my stepdad and I were living in Washington State outside of Seattle, early 90s. And my stepdad was working as a pastor. He was a music and youth pastor guy. And they were like born again Christians, more like Baptist people. Okay. And then my dad and my stepmom were kind of like Irish Catholic, just meaning that we got drunk and we went to midnight mass once a year or something like that, but mostly never. So I didn't really respond or identify with the Christian stuff at all, but I grew up around it. So my stepdad and my mom, that's who I spent. That was like home. And please forgive me, I don't mean anything, crappy or anything like that. Like I love my family a lot, but it was a broken kind of deal. And I would go in the summers to St. Louis. And when I would be so excited to see my dad and my little brothers, I have 2 little brothers, and my stepmom were dope. And so I'd look forward to those summer breaks. And then I'd get out there and it was just a totally different culture. And so there was a lot of drinking. And at some point, if not a couple points, it felt like every summer there'd be a few different, like pretty big breakdowns. And so I think I spent my summers trying really hard to be seen and noticed by my father. And there wasn't enough time, but my speed there in St. Louis was be big enough that I would hope he would notice me. But I tried to stay really small because I didn't want to get hurt. There was a lot of really sketchy stuff that happened, and it was very traumatizing. So I would go out in the summers excited, and I'd usually come home sort of shell-shocked and kind of stoked to get out of there, and sort of guilty and full of shame about that at the same time. And then I'd get around my mom and my stepdad, and they'd have this different culture, and I didn't respect my stepfather, even though he's like a great man. He's really, really great, but I hated them, and I hated their God, and I hated their setup. And so by about 12, 13, I started running away, and I didn't know where I fit. And so it was like I had no clue how to have an identity. Didn't have the shelving inside necessarily for self-esteem. Really, it was whatever people would reflect back to me. And we moved so much with my mom and my stepdad that it was like I would start over every year. I think I'd go out to see my dad in the Lou, and then but when we came back, it's like there was a few years where my mom would pick me up at the airport and go, "We're going to play a game. Let's see if you can tell me where we live now." And so
oh my gosh,
we'd be like driving it, and she'd be like, "Is it a right or a left?" And it was funny, and we're like listening to Huey Lewis in the news, and we're like having a great time. But it was like legit. Like I'd leave, and then I'd come back, and it'd be a new place and a new school and a new setup a lot of the time. And some of that was just because my mom was so young. My stepdad he had graduated from college in the Bay, and then he went to seminary. There was just a lot of movement, and that's what led us up to Washington. I remember we left seminary, and we were driving north, and there was 2 options. One was outside of Washington, and one was in Anchorage or Juneau, Alaska.
Oh my!
And on the drive north to figure out which church was going to say yes, the Alaska place said no. And so I remember them crying in the hotel bathroom because it's like, we're going to Washington. We don't have another option right now. And I remember getting there and I was so pumped because for me, I was in 5th grade. I had been getting bullied pretty heavy in the Bay Area, and I was kind of looking forward to getting out of there. And then we landed in Washington, and I was surrounded by a youth group that was full of like punk and grunge rock kids. And it's 1991 in Tacoma, Washington. And so the music scene is like phenomenal, and it's just like exploding around me. And all these dudes are like trouble. So they're sneaking around and like going and doing drugs, but listening to fantastic music. And that's when I started falling in love with music. And it was like the birth of like kind of the heyday of the grunge rock scene of the early 90s in Seattle. And I just remember thinking, they're making their own music. I want to do that. And so I started learning how to play drums. I had this friend named Brian, and then these other kids, they were kind of like these alternative kids that would go to the Rocky Horror Picture Show and stuff like that when we were like 13, and they were all into like Crass and the Sex Pistols and all this stuff. And so it was like punk rock initially. My goal was to try to play as fast as I could. And then,
absolutely.
and that was kind of like my intro to like, the Fat Records era of like the Warped Tour and NoFX and all of that. That was like the first, I remember going to see them in the parking lot. I think of like the Kingdom in Tacoma in 1992 or 3. And just being so pumped on like music, like, but I wasn't allowed to like listen to it. So that was the identity crisis. Was like, these guys, Jesus hates everything that I love, and I'm not allowed to be myself here. And so I would bounce for sometimes weeks at a time and just go stay with friends. And I was just all over the place. Got into drugs and was just like, I was really like, I was right on the edge. And then I'd go to St. Louis in the summers and I'd be so stoked to see my family, but it was just very broken. And so I say that to shine a light, not on how crappy anybody else was, but the level of like the lack of identity that I had. And the quest to find identity is like the number one hunger of the human soul. Mm-hmm. And the only people that seem to give me identity were these people that would allow me to be myself. But the problem was it was so messed up. The world that I was a part of was so toxic that I was finding my identity in some ways, but I was also feeding a part of an identity that was really going to become poisonous for me, because as fate would have it, my stepfather resigned from the church he was at and got a job with a paper company that had a plant in Salt Lake City. And so my dad had moved to Salt Lake with the railroad. And then 2 years later, my mom and my stepfather and I ended up leaving Washington State and coming to Salt Lake. And so for the first time in my life, as like a sophomore in high school, I had my mom and my dad in the same city again. And then that was my first introduction really to the hardcore scene, sort of like the vegan straight edge, like hardcore scene in Salt Lake City. And what I remember was I loved the music. And then I just thought, I don't understand why there's like this. It was very intense here. There was crazy fights. And so I just remember thinking like, what an interesting place. And so during that 10th grade year, I was really experimenting a lot with drinking. I was drinking on my own. I was trading liquor with kind of the gangster kids at my school. I was like, I just was sort of like experimenting fully. And that was what I thought was cool. And I had a couple of run-ins where I needed to get sober. I think I was like 15 and a half or turning 16. And I just ended up like going overboard. So it was like a 3.5 day drunk thing we did over the 4th of July at my homie Dave's house because his family was out of town. And I remember waking up day 3 still kind of like half hungover and just thinking like, I don't know if I like this. And then like my dad and my stepmom went out of town, and my dad had a crazy party at his house that went on for a few days. And I remember a bunch of his softball buddies and like dudes from the bar scene that he was connected to all came over. And I remember like snorting stuff with like friends of his that were like super old. And I felt horrible afterwards. And I just remember thinking like, I don't know if I would think this was cool if I didn't think my dad was so cool. Like I have to do something different, And I was like, oh. And so I remember going across the street to some friends of mine. I left my dad's house after that party. I went across the street to some friends of mine that I knew were sober, and I thought they were part of the scene, but I didn't know. And I just said, I think I need to get like sober. Can I hang out with you guys? And they were these vegan straight edge kids that were not like violent, but they were into all the music. They were super positive kind of people, and they played music. And so my friend Peter, my friend Nathan, and my friend John, they became like kind of my introduction into like the hardcore scene. And it was a very safe place, and I literally just needed to get my head straight. And so I knew that if you said you were straight edge in Salt Lake City, if you played with that, there was a penalty. And so I didn't mess around, and I didn't want to mess around. So I was like, I think I'm going to, after a couple months of hanging out with them, I was like, I think I'm going to choose to become straight edge, and I'm not going to mess around with stuff because I think it's bad for me. And then I got to play music with these great kids, and that was my introduction to the hardcore scene. And my first show was like a Catharsis Clear show at like Classic Skating in 1996 or 1997 or something like that. So anyways, that was like where I got into the scene.
There's like so much I want to ask you too. There's so much complexity, and like just hearing you talk, and I'm like, I went to 4 elementary schools before I left elementary school. So like, I know that feeling, and being a product of like not even remembering your parents' divorce, you know, because you were too young to remember, and seeing multiple divorces. But the level of uncertainty you went through, where it's like home is not even a given, and you're driving to Washington, but you don't even know, like you're a kid witnessing, like we may not even have a place in Washington, and you're bouncing back. And little side tangent, because I want to get into this too, but Chris and I always talk about Salt Lake straight edge as being like very cut from a different cloth. And when I was in high school, I had a friend, I don't remember her last name. Her name was Cardi, but she moved out, and she went to high school with me. Mm-hmm. And her boyfriend came out, and I was straight edge at the time. But when I like met this guy, I was like, this is a different level. He had like hand tattoos and 1-inch plugs. And I was just like, he wasn't a big guy or anything, but I just knew he was like way harder than we were growing up in South Orange County. And it was like, okay, Salt Lake is like, they take it serious there.
It was touched by a few different things, if I can speak to that. I think it's a very, my dear friend, one of me and Chris's like best friends ever, you know, it's like a brother, similar. Chris, I was in his wedding. I have 5 people that were in my line when I married my Chrissy Green, and it was Chris, my 2 little brothers, my brother-in-law, Aaron Craner, and Eric Gregson. And so our homie Eric from Redlands, you know, he said if it would be fascinating in some way to do a documentary about the Salt Lake City vegan straight edge community in the early 90s, because there was massive militant animal rights activity that was going on. It was the birth of, it went from kind of like child's play, like we're going to vandalize stuff because we're vegetarian and we love PETA, to full on direct action. There was federal charges pressed. There was people looking at 25 to 30 to life for blowing up trucks. And I'm at the tail end of this, fully the tail end of it, but I ended up linking up with a bunch of people that were looking at real deal federal time. And you had dudes that were snitching on one another and looking at massive prison sentences. You had dudes getting stabbed at shows because this was not like hardcore drama. This was like, you are on tape talking to the feds, and now my brother and my brother's friend is looking at 22 years to life in prison. So we're going to snuff you out for being a snitch. Like, it was like real horrible. I mean, it was like intense, and that colored a massive divide. That was part of what galvanized the music scene, because there was real big boy decisions being made. There was people blowing up trucks at mink plants. There was people that were liberating animals from like fur farms. There was people that blew, you know, I know the dude, he was underage and he would laugh about it at this point, but like he blew up a McDonald's. Like it was very militant, and it felt very radicalized. And so there's an intensity here. And there was dudes in Orange County that were linked up with Salt Lake dudes, and they were all vegan straight edge guys, and there was some serious stuff going on.
Wasn't it? It was also kind of like born out of fighting, like young kids fighting off the skinheads. Oh yeah, similar to Orange County. I feel like there was a lot of 15 to 20-year-old kids fighting grown men with waist chains. You know what I mean? Like, you're not allowed to be here. And then the news didn't help, because there was a bunch of news reports that came out in the mid 90s here that basically said Salt Lake City, or straight edge, is Salt Lake City's biggest gang. And when that happened, it put a bunch of music kids that were just down to skate together. I mean, 300 or 400 kids at a show are all of a sudden this huge quote unquote gang in the city. So then all the real gangsters in Salt Lake started coming out to test. And so there was gunfights and all sorts of crazy stuff that started happening, because it was like, oh, you guys are a gang now? Let's see. And so it's partly why there was this antagonistic relationship between the hardcore scene and cops and news reporters. That's why we don't talk to them.
because they made a lot of people's lives living hell by just trying to come up with stories. And some of it was so sensationalized. It was so stupid. So anyways, and I was like a young kid. So I'm like nobody. I'm fully a new jack. And these are like dudes that have been in it for years. And it's super intense and very violent. And it was very much like a proving ground. And it felt like you were stepping into a thing. I haven't felt that for a long time in terms of the hardcore scene, but I remember the feeling of like, you felt a bit like you're stepping into a different world. And it really was like us against the whole rest of the planet, which is interesting as like an abused kid. You know, it's just like, this feels like home. I've said it before. Like, I think kids that are sexually abused, I was sexually abused when I was super young, in St. Louis and in California. And then I was physically abused by my family and stuff like that. And so when stuff like that happens when you're a little kid, I think a lot of people, your empathy skyrockets. You start becoming really aware of what environments feel like. And I almost wonder if like the spiritual gift of discerning of spirits, like the discerning of environments, it gets kicked on in the wrong direction. It's supposed to be almost like initiated in this beautiful spiritual realm of the Holy Spirit. We're supposed to become very aware of the presence of love and the presence of God, the presence of forgiveness. When we get abused and manipulated at a young age, our like discernment muscle kicks on too early. And so we become really good at reading rooms, but we're lost sort of spiritually. You know what I mean? Like it's like we're out of tune. And so for me, I just remember feeling like when I stepped into the hardcore scene and I was aware of the chaos that could erupt at any moment, there was a part of me that thrived in it. I was like, oh, okay, I know how to manage this. And
it was kind of on your own terms, right? Because that's part of the identity issue, I think, is that it kind of feels controllable. In a sense that like, okay, I've had nothing but chaos in my life, but this is chaos that I have a part of. Yeah. Like, so I can find that. And so identity, I think, is a big deal. Like hardcore kids are hard to find, like, that are emotionally stable. Like, it's like, why are you here?
No, you're totally right. Like, when we're aggressive. And so it's a hyper masculine culture. So we're talking to a whole generation of people that there's a whole lot of us that have a father gap. And I think, and whether we like it or not, it's just something that we live with. And so I think in general, like people like us we're creative, sensitive hearts in a lot of ways, but we come up in this spot, you just know the rule. It's like, okay, well, if I meet your aggression with aggression and I learn to keep my mouth shut, I can hang out. Mm-hmm. You know, I can dip here. This is fine. Like, I'll be fine here, because what I do know is the fury and the protective crew that I've now clicked up with, they are a holy terror to anyone that would ever try to hurt me. Right. And as long as I'm down to pay my dues with them, and they know I'm a sweetheart, but at least I would fight if I needed to, even if I lost, right? Like, at least they knew that I was there. I can be here. And so I'd rather have that kind of danger on my side than maybe face or deal with how horrible, everything really is.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think a lot of us that came through the punk, the hardcore scene, and I throw skateboarding in there because skating and punk kind of went hand in hand if you grew up in the 90s, which we all did. And a lot of us, like, it is, Chris, you always say, like, my all in nature. I feel like a lot of us, it's like when we find a worthy cause, we're like, okay, I'm all in on it. I'm not lukewarm about it. And a lot of us that have found Jesus, that formative punk hardcore era kind of helped bridge it, where it's like, I'm not going to be lukewarm about this. I'm going to be real about this. And I think it comes from that era of time too. And it's something I really love, even though a lot of us were like misfits that found a home and it was messy, Yeah. But how did you end up in Redlands after? So your sophomore year, you're Salt Lake City. When do you move to Redlands?
So what happened was I was with my mom and my stepfather a lot of the time. If I could be completely honest, there was an incident between me and my old man. I was sober at this point. I think I had just gone fully sober. It was that same summer. And dude, he just like punched me out. And I don't know, I'm not entirely sure why. It was just one of those days where he was jacked up and mad at me because he thought I was trying to be a manipulator. And maybe I had manipulated like every other day but that day, but I did not do it that day. I just remember looking at him like I was kind of knocked out. And I remember walking upstairs and I just watched him and was just like, why did you just do that? Walked upstairs and was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I told my stepmom what had happened, and I just was like, I'm out of here. And so I didn't go back to my dad for probably like 2.5 years. At that point, I didn't speak to him. For Chris, he would know,
I know your dad.
Matt, I love my family, and I love my brothers and stuff. And like, we're all just like weirdo outlaw. And so I remember being with my mom and my stepdad, and that was where I lived. I left the world of kind of the greenhouse, which sucked because I miss my little brothers and I miss my dad. I miss my stepmom, but I couldn't do it. And I just remember being with my mom and my stepdad, which was then all of their culture all the time. And so I ended up leaving home. I think I was like 17. I ended up leaving home and moving in with my girlfriend. And then I was just going to finish my senior year early because I was like way ahead. We ended up working at a clothing store together during the holidays for a Christmas season. And there was a bunch of hardcore kids that worked at this spot. And one of her friends was a girl that worked at this store with us named Jeannie. And when she went back to California, an old friend of hers named Eric like proposed to her, and they were going to get engaged to be married. And all of a sudden I was like, what? And so now all these hardcore kids from Southern California came out to pick up Jeannie when No Innocent Victim came through Salt Lake on tour. And so all of a sudden now Jeannie and all of these other like hardcore kids that were super kind, they were all like Christian kids. And I was not like at all. I just remember thinking like, oh, these guys are great. Like, and they danced hard, and there was mad beef. Like I remember a bunch of my friends were going to beat up everybody. And I remember sitting with Eric and like hoping that somehow them knowing me would somehow half shield it. And it was very sketchy, but I just remember thinking like, these dudes are really cool. I remember getting food with the NIV dudes, and in some way, the spirit of Christ that was with NIV reminded me of the safety and the spirit of my mom and my stepdad's house. Even though I resented it and I didn't want anything to do with it, I could feel that these are safe people. Like these are good people. And so I just became friends with Eric, and then Eric and Jeannie ended up coming back out to work in Salt Lake for a handful of months because jobs were kind of rough to come by in the IE at that point. He was trying to pull himself up the ladder doing body work and become like a hot rod builder guy. And so he came out to Salt Lake to work and do body work here because he couldn't get a job in Purdue. And so over those few months that they lived out in Salt Lake, I would go over and hang out with them at this house. They stayed at a house out here. And the house, there was a guy that was here and basically his wife. They were basically husband and wife. And he was a singer in a really powerful hardcore band out here. He was a crazy straight edge vegan guy. He was he was kind of a head in the scene, and he had been in a really horrible car accident, and he'd become quadriplegic, and she stayed to take care of him. And so they were kind of a notorious couple because I knew who he was. And so Jeannie and Eric, my Redlands friend now, stayed with them for the period of months while they were out here working. And so I would just go over to this couple's house all the time. And that's how I made, Alex and Shannon's acquaintance. And I was just a kid, getting ready to graduate from high school and no real direction. I was living with my girlfriend who was Jeannie's friend. And Eric basically said to me one day, I don't know where you're at with the God stuff, but I feel like God sent me out here to bring you home. And I was like, whoa. And he was super stoic, and he barely said 9 words back then. And like, huh. Like if you were like, how are you doing, Eric? He'd be like, huh. And that was like a full sentence for him. Like
everyone thought Eric hated him, to some extent, because he would just sit there and he would like look at you and like look down at you. And I remember one time he was like, dude, you're one of my best friends. I was like, really?
Like,
oh, that's good,
seriously,
man.
That's like the whole thing. So I was about to graduate high school, and I broke up with this girl that I was living with. And I moved in with my old, hardcore kid friend, Peter. And I was just going to be there because Eric basically said, you should come out to Redlands with us. We're getting ready to go back to Redlands. And so the plan was I was going to graduate. I was going to walk at my graduation, packed up my bags, and we were all leaving to Redlands the next day. And so this girl that was living there, she was going to drive us out to California. And so that was my plan. I walked at my graduation. It was awesome. And then I went to Alex and Shannon's house. I fell asleep on their couch. I woke up the next morning and we were driving to Redlands. And that was the first time I'd really ever gone there. And so we were there for maybe like a week, and maybe 3 or 4 days into that trip, I ended up having an affair with this girl. That was when my world fractured.
Right.
Because it was like, I made this decision. Like she was like pursuing me and she was interested in me, and she was like in her 20s. And I was like this little, like 18-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just graduated. And I just remember feeling like whoa. And I thought she was just this amazing human. She was this young person that had decided to stay with her partner and help him. And he had been, it was like the weirdest deal. He was this, I mean, a powerhouse of a dude. I mean, really, he was just he was incredible.
Like legendary, notorious.
Dude. And just like a holy terror of a human, and no one you wanted to mess with. And he hated everyone. I just ended up kind of like being around him, and the part of me that loved both of them, I just wanted to make their life easier. And so I found myself running errands for them, or just trying, again, like the dad mom wound. How can I help make family? How do I navigate this?
Right.
And I would be kind to him, and he'd look at me like, why are you being nice to me? And I'm like, dude, I just think you're awesome. And he'd be like, what? Like he was so used to people taking from him or being manipulative around him, or he was so used to his level of hatred and real pain in the world, that it was almost like wild. So we go to California, and on that trip, I make this decision, and we have this like fling secretly while we're in California. And then we drive back. We come back to, she needed someone to drive back with her to Salt Lake. And I just remember thinking, I'll go to the dentist, I'll see my mom again real quick, and then I'll just Greyhound back to Redlands. And I think that's it, but I'm totally double-minded at this point, because now I've had this connection with this person. It's completely out of line. To be very clear, the judgment I have against myself at this point is, oh, Tommy, you think you're a good guy? You just cheated on a dude in a wheelchair. That's who you are. You're the worst. Like, you totally took advantage of this guy. Like, you are a coward. You're a snake. You're a liar. And you totally understand this girl, and you totally care about her, and she totally cares about you too. And this is the weirdest world you've ever been in your life. So it was like, it felt like a glass mirror, like just fracturing. And so I remember going back to Utah. They're at each other's throats again, because they were really having a hard time in their relationship at this point too. It's like midnight by the time we get back to Salt Lake, and I go to sit in the little spare room, and I'm like, I don't know what to do, because now I'm in their house again. And I hear him go, Tom, come here. And I'm like, oh my God, he knows. I don't know how he knows, but he knows, So I walk in there, he's laying in his bed, and he's like, hey man, what is your plans while you're here? And I said, well, I'm going to go see my mom, and I'm going to go to the dentist, and then I was going to take a Greyhound back. And he goes, why don't you stick around for a little while? It'll make things a lot easier. And I'm like, oh no. And so then for the next 2 weeks, I'm up with him every night until 2, 3 in the morning, talking with him about his life. And they're basically separating in front of me, and he's trying to like win her back, and she's sneaking away with me on the side. So I'm this 18-year-old kid that on one hand is trying to take care of this dude who I can see with like real love and compassion why he's so pissed and what he's gone through. And I have all this love for him, and man, I want him to be okay. And then on the other hand, I'm fully infatuated, and there's this sick like soul tie happening between this girl and I. What is going on? And about 2 weeks in, he called me, and I helped him put his shoes on, and then I transferred him to his chair. And he's like, I think I want you to take her, and I want you to go hang out with your friends for the day. And he said the hospital is going to send a van to pick me up, and I'm going to go get on antidepressants, and I'm going to be at the hospital for a week or two. And I said, okay. And so my thought was like, okay, I'll take her to hang out with my goofy high school friends, and we'll just try to have a good time. And then he said, call me later and make sure that the van came to get me, or make sure that I'm gone. And I said, okay. So I called later that night, and he's like, yeah, I'm just hanging out with some of the friends, and then the van's going to come get me in the morning. And I said, okay. He said, I'm just hanging out watching cartoons and eating pixie sticks. That's what I want to do. And I was like, all right, tight. And I could hear his homies there in the background. And it was just like he was just trying to get some time to himself, and he needed a break and whatever. And I wake up the next morning at my friend's house. Shen's sitting at the edge of the bed, and she's yelling into the phone, like, no, you need to tell me what's going on. You need to tell me what's going on. So I get the phone, and it's her mom. And she goes, Tom, you need to get Shannon in the car and get back over here. Alex is dead. And he had gotten everybody out of the house, and then he'd had his friends start a car. He had a classic Cadillac that didn't run. And he called a dude to come and fix the Cadillac to get it running that day. And so he'd gotten the Cadillac running, and then told one of his dear friends, who just had no clue what he was planning, hey, you got to hear the Cadillac run before you leave, I think, and so he started the car, but we'd never seen him actually get over the little lip into the garage on his own. He didn't have like a lot of arm strength. but he waited for the car to start, and then he wheeled himself into the garage and he killed himself.
It's like really heavy.
It was horrific. It's horrific. And his homie had a bad feeling about it. One of his best friends, his name was Sean, and he had a really bad feeling about it. He went to work at UPS that night and called at like 2 or 3 a.m. a couple hours later, and no one answered. And he immediately drove back to the house. He was like, nope. He ran into the house, and Shannon's mom and little sisters lived downstairs. And the gas, the smell, the fumes of the gas were already so thick in the house that from the time he hit the front door to the downstairs, he was slipping on the stairs because it was so thick in the house. So it was really good that he came back, because I think it could have put everyone else in the house at real danger. And so by the grace of God, Sean got the other people out of the house, but then, Alex was dead. And so I just remember the feeling of pulling up. His note was the thing. So sorry, I'm trying to catch up. It's been a long time since I thought about this, but it's like his note, he left a note, and the first line of the note was, Tom Green, as soon as possible, please help Shannon through this. And so I'm like, oh my God. Like, I think about it now, it's like messing me up a little bit, but I just think of like being this 18-year-old kid kneeling in front of this dude's dead body, sobbing, going, I'm so sorry. I didn't get a chance to tell you. I'm so sorry. I blew it, but I swear to God, I will love her. I promise I will love her. I will help her through this. I'll make it up now, because there's no way for me to make it up to you. There's no way for me to take it back. I cannot come clean anymore. Like, I don't know what to do. And so I was like committed. It was like, I'm fully committed to this person. I've lost my integrity inside. I've lost my identity. I have no idea who I am, but I will love this person. You've told me to love this person. And so that's what I'm going to do to try to make it up to you and try to make it right. Right. And so that was wild. And, we kept our relationship secret. I remember that, to be honest, Al was one of the dudes that was looking at federal time before his accident. He was one of the dudes that was looking, I think, 25 years to life for some animal rights stuff. And so was Sean, the dude that came to get him. There's a bunch of his friends that were all roped up, and there was dudes from Southern California that were part of those charges as well. And so the court case for that whole thing was like a month and a half later. And I remember there was all these dudes from Orange County and all these dudes from Salt Lake, old dudes that were all there at the trial. And everyone was acquitted except for the kids that ratted, which was very interesting. I was cornered by them. I didn't realize they were all in town. I left a movie theater late at night with some friends, and they were all there. And I was like, oh no. And they called me across the parking lot. No one else is there. And they're just like, we're going to take you around the corner. We're going to stab you. And they just called me out. I was like caught. Like fully caught. I had, I think, a can of bear mace and a knife in my pocket. And I walk up to them and they're like, get your hands out of your pockets right now. And I was like, oh my God, these are like the most terrifying people in the world to me.
Dude, that's a real situation.
Yeah, it was like a real deal. And so I just remember standing there, my legs began to shake. I'm feeling that terror and the adrenaline dump. And I just remember looking at all of them and telling them some of the things that Alex had told me about them. And then telling them basically like, you don't know what you're talking, like lying my way out of it. And also telling them like, F you. I've been there. I was with him at the end. You weren't. You guys tried to use him for his money. I was just like going down in flames, you know, like I wrote about it in Holy Name. I actually wrote about that encounter in a song, a little track called Open Skies. It's like, I don't know what happened in the parking lot, but like, these are like hitters. Like these were sketchy people. And like, I don't know, I'm standing there by myself and the only witnesses are with them. And it's like, I don't know why I didn't die, but they let me go. And I remember I lived in terror from that point forward. I just remember everywhere I went in the city, I wasn't sure who was going to show up. It was like fully, like everywhere I went, I was ready. I was fully on edge all the time.
Just to put into context, because I'm putting myself in your shoes and it's like, she's in her 20s. She might as well have been, 30 at that point. When you're 18, someone's 22. That feels like the gap of a lifetime. It's like, whoa, they're like an adult. Yeah. They know what they're doing in life. And you're also conflicted because you're getting to know this guy in a vulnerable way. You're getting more and more depth about his life. You're understanding him in a way that you've never understood him before, in a way that maybe few other people do.
Few people ever did. Like, that's the point, is like, I was like let in.
And you're suffocated by this secret that you have to carry, that there's this double life you're leading. And you're like, I love this guy. I can't tell him. they're breaking up anyway. She's pursuing me. I love her. I love them both in different ways, and I don't know what to do here.
Fully.
And the easy road is to just keep going with it because she's kind of the one that's pursuing it, you know?
Yep.
And then when he dies, the weight that must have been on you is like hard to even comprehend how you would be feeling in that.
The day of his funeral, and everybody's at the house, and I remember sitting on the edge of the bed where I used to sit with him. And I remember that I remember where his guns were, and I remember like a Smith & Wesson little handgun. And I remember holding it, and I just remember thinking, I don't have a version of this where I can make up for it. Despite my best intentions, I'm looking at his father, who was this beautiful man. I'm looking at his sisters. I'm looking at his stepmother. I'm looking at his family. I'm looking at the weight of what has been lost. And even though it's not on me, and I say that because one of the dudes that was there that was going to kill me called me a couple of years ago after hearing my testimony on a Sleeping Giant video. And he said, I didn't know that. I didn't know that that was like your story, man. I would love to sit down with you because I think you're carrying like a whole lot of stuff that you don't need to carry. I was around back then. I remember what it was like for them. It was so wild. So I can say that with somewhat of a clear conscience is I felt like I was the straw that broke the camel's back. And if I hadn't have done this, he would have still been alive. So I felt responsible for his death, for sure.
The enemy will capitalize on that all day long, too. That kind of a stronghold, he'll beat you up with that day and night.
And the weight of one life, right? Like this, the beauty of one life. Even though he was like, I can say this honestly, I think he would laugh in his twisted way. This was not a good dude. Like he was not a good guy. Like there was a season in his life where his vow was to only go out once a day and to ruin someone's day once a day.
That's so gnarly.
He was so pissed. He was the most pissed. I mean, it was awesome, but it was like so dark. So I'm just saying, like, this was not a dude that was a ray of sunshine. But dude, he was incredible. He was a real one for sure. And he had tried to end his life a few different times. So I can see now as a 42-year-old man, oh man, I totally contributed to more brokenness in his world, but I'm not responsible for his death. But I could not see that day of his funeral. So I'm sitting on the side of the bed, I'm crying. And I basically am like, I don't know how to believe in God. I don't know where God is. But I just remember thinking like, I think I should kill myself because the only way to balance the scale is like he dies, so I should die. And I just remember thinking, I'm like looking at this gun, I'm looking at the side of the bed, and I'm just thinking, I'm not going to do it right now. That would be really selfish to all these people. But I think I need to die because it's the only way to balance it out. And I don't remember how it happened. I've said it from stage and I'm trying to like characterize the moment. And so, I've said it the same way is I felt interrupted by a voice or a presence of something that was like, don't. Like, give me time. And I didn't get saved. I lived in this relationship. We got pregnant and I had my daughter, right? Like we built a home and like moved into it. We sold that home and we built another home and we had a family together. And then we were getting married and we got married St. Patrick's Day, 2002. And then we were building a life together. And as we were getting ready for our wedding, a friend of mine from Redlands, his father committed suicide. I remember sobbing, thinking, I should have been there. I should have been there with him. I'm having a response of like, oh, remember Redlands? Remember how you were going to go to California and you were going to start over? And it was going to be like this cool thing with your friends. And look where you are. And I was in this beautiful life, but I just remember feeling this like, oh, remember that? I should have been there for this poor kid because I know what this is going to feel like now. I know the pit of suicide and the trauma and the tragedy and all the swirl. And so we, before we got married, are like, let's move to Redlands. And so it's been a couple years. Everyone in Redlands is down for us, even though the way that our relationship came out was basically when we finally told everyone we were going to have a baby. We got married St. Pat's of 2002. We moved out to Redlands May of 2002, just a couple months after we got married. My little girl's like 1, we buy this little house in Redlands and I'm super pumped. Like we're out here and this is so wild. And again, like everyone just makes their own decisions and it's all good. Like it's all good. But I watched my wife fall in love with this kid whose dad had committed suicide. And they ended up having this affair. I remember going over to his house. I just remember feeling all this weird tension, and there was this division and this gap opening up in my life. And I remember watching and just feeling like, I was in a band with him. And I mean, he was a lot of fun, but I was like, I'm way cooler than him. I mean that. Like, I'm awesome. This kid sucked as far as I was concerned. Like,
I grew up with him.
I'm saying, like, he's awesome. He's great. He's a good time. But, like, he's not a me. Are you kidding me? And I just was, like, blown away. And yet it felt familiar to me. And so I remember calling him and being like, hey, man, do you have a thing for my wife? And he's like, no, man, I would never do that. Yada, yada, yada. And I said, well, because she'd rather hang out with you than hang out with me and be a wife and mother. So maybe skedaddle, maybe don't hang around so much. And he didn't want to hear that. And I remember thinking, like, okay. And then I went to work and I came home, and I remember her telling me, like, I went on a drive with him and I told him that I had feelings for him. And I was like, oh, okay. What did he say? And she said, he said he had feelings for me too, but he didn't know what to do about it. And I was like, all right, I'll go talk to him. So I drive up to this kid's house. I'm looking at this kid, just thinking, Tommy, remember what it was like when you almost got shanked at the movie theater. Remember what it was like when you were caught, And I'm looking at him going like, dude, I know where you are. And I know what it is. What I said to him was, I know what it is to be you at the exact same age with the exact same person. Don't do this. And I said, because here's what's going to happen. You're going to hook up with her. And in a couple of years, you're going to leave and you're going to go somewhere new. And she's going to leave you. And he just could not hear it. I was staying with Eric at this point because our relationship was like fractured. I know how this is going to go. Like, I know how this is going to end. But what I didn't want to do to him is what was done to me. Was the minute I was threatened and I was the level of shame and the level of fear that was put on me, all I could do was hide. And so I just remember telling all my friends, like, don't touch him. They are wrong right now. The minute we're wrong, they're right. And I can't have that. I want my wife back. I don't care. I want her to choose me again. And I think if we can be patient, we can walk this out. But don't do anything.
That was unique in that setting because you had because I remember, I was there for all this. This was like, right. I was hanging out with you almost every day, I feel like, at this point.
Yeah.
Because it was trauma, dude. It was wild.
So crappy.
And the fact like you mentioned, you guys were in the same band together, which was wild.
Yeah.
And friends were like, I want to do something about it. And it was so wild to hear you say, like, no, don't do it. This was a big part of you really, like, becoming really a Christian, right? This was like where it all went down and where God started making a big,
This was it. Yeah, this is that moment. So that's what I'd say too, Chris. Like, you remember it. I just remember what I would say too is, like, when I was found by Christ, when I really met Jesus, I met him as a bridegroom that had lost his bride. I just remember feeling like, I just love this woman. I gave everything I could for her, for the sake of this person. And I thought, for sure, if you love someone as much as I love this person, this stuff doesn't happen. Like, and then I just remember I would read stories and I'd hear stories of God talking to his people. And he would say stuff like, you used to follow me and now you don't. And so I just remember thinking, like, Jesus knows what it's like when someone stops loving him. He allows people to walk it out. God just makes the sun shine. If you happen to be a piece of trash, the sun's still going to hit you. If you are this beautiful saint of a human, you get to walk in the sunshine too. But God's goodness is just indiscriminate. He just makes the sunshine. And so I just remember thinking, like, he's just so good. And he's so good at loving people, because my experience was, I'm sleeping with somebody else's wife. I contributed to the death of her partner. I'm a total liar, hider, manipulative snake. And he is being so patient with me that he stopped me from killing myself. And he let me live for years to bring me here. So he's super patient with people. And I just remember thinking, like, I got to be patient. she'll recognize that I have the capacity to change or grow, and maybe in our family, like we have a little girl, like there's more worth fighting for here. I think if I can outlast this loser, I think I have a shot. That was when I felt like I was becoming awakened to, I need God. Like I needed God. I didn't need anybody else's help. I was so lonely and so hurting. I had reaped what I had sown, and I was living in the effects of my own choices. And he was comfort for me. He didn't change anything, but he comforted me. Like he was my partner, and I could share with him like things I was going through. And I don't know how to say it because he's like invisible, but I would be like, can you please help me? And it makes me want to cry, but it was like he would help me. Like he would talk with me almost, like I could feel him, and he was allowing me to like be with him. And when I didn't have love in my life and I lost love in my life, he would meet soul needs, emotional needs, intellectual needs that I had that I didn't have a partner for. Like his presence would supply. And so I was like, he was real. And I didn't think he was real. I thought he was control, and I thought he was an idea, and I thought he was politics. And all of a sudden he is helping me love in an impossible way. And I didn't understand it. I remember Death Star wanted to do like communion at a show, and I was like, no, like I was not into it at all. But then all of a sudden I'm confronted with, this is the truth of your life, Tommy Green. What do you think? This is the life you built. This is what you get when you build with those bricks. Did the theology you've been building with your life, do you see the fruit of it? Is this what you want? And I'm like, oh my God. I totally thought I was smart. I totally thought I had a cool idea of you. And it was twisted up, and look at the fruit of it. But I had this goal in my mind of like, I'm just going to stay in this, and I'm going to love her, and I'm going to love her. And I'm even going to try my best to love him, because if I love him, he can listen to me. Maybe I'll have some level of like influence to warn him off of where he's going. And then at a certain point I moved, I took Marin, and I gave my wife and her partner, I just said, you guys got to figure your stuff out. I'm going to take Marin. I'm going to go stay with my parents for a couple of months. And so I left Redlands and I went to Georgia, and I stayed in Georgia for a few months with my mom and my stepdad. And that lonely 2.5 months, just me and Marin, my folks, and like the Lord, that was when I feel like I actually heard like the voice of the Spirit of God. I started dreaming again in the night, and I started just having like a lot of inspired moments with the Lord. And in that, I just was like, I didn't know you were real. I'm sorry. Can I tell people? And I felt like he was like, yeah, you can tell people. So I got back and started meeting with pastors, told them I'm going to start a Bible study for kids that maybe like me, like don't want to go to church right now, but they need Christ. And that was kind of the start of it, man. That started Tiffany, which was like the first Bible study I did at the apartment. Just before I got back to California, my little brother and a couple of homies beat the piss out of this kid that was with my wife when I was out of town. And so that kind of ruined everything. And so my daughter wasn't allowed to come over and hang out with me for like a while when I got back into town, because I was staying with the dudes that beat up this guy, and that sucked. And I told them not to do that. And then I got in trouble for it, which sucked. And so we got a new apartment with some friends, and they had an extra room, and they said, maybe you and Marin can use this room. And so we started a Bible study at that apartment, and that turned into kind of like our first church.
This is like kind of one of those situations, almost like when you read the story of the prodigal son. It's like you can sympathize with the younger brother and being rebellious and taking your inheritance and blowing it and being left with nothing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
other seasons, you're like, I sympathize with the older brother who's like, what? I've been doing everything I'm supposed to, and you're really going to let him back in the house, and the jealousy. And it's funny when I think of this situation, it's like you're sympathizing with the young adulterer and the husband, because you're like, I've been there, and now I'm where he was before he took his life, and I can sympathize in both places. And you're like, well, I don't want what was done to me, but it almost sounds like you're kind of like, I'm going to love on them as a form of maybe I can control the situation. There's still that desire to like, I can control it if I'm just like, I'll love you so hard that I can make you do what I want you to do. And God still used that to bring you close. He's like, hey, what you're trying to do is not really going to work out how you think it is, but I'm going to use it. And I'm going to draw you in a way that you've never been drawn in before. And it's just cool how God orchestrates these things, even out of the mess, you know?
Yeah, that's so good, because he won't let, again, the real kingdom, the kingdom is within, right? And so those desires, I would say, like the troubles that we create for ourselves in fear and in pride and in selfishness and in self-preservation and ego and all that stuff that rises up in us, you know, you're exactly right. And what I realized, to dovetail off of what you said, yes, I was thinking I could still somehow work it out. I could work it out. If I did the right thing, then the right thing would happen, right? Never mind that everything about where I was at and where I was living from and what was going on in my heart was like the curse of the garden. You know, you're going to sow beautiful plants and flowers, but you're going to reap thorns and thistles. It's like when I do the right thing and the wrong thing keeps happening, it's like that's because something is fundamentally misaligned. And so I was living in this place of going, well, if I do the thing you said to do, will that change the thing? And what ultimately it was like, no, if you do the thing I tell you to do, it will change you. I did a bunch of like healing men's, like Christian men's healing restoration workshops. They were like multiple weekends, multiple days. And I'm just trying to do the work, you know, in a weekend at one of the weekends up in Big Bear. I remember, I'm the same age as my dad with a kid the same age as me going through my first divorce too. I could pin a lot of it on the sympathetic thing that I had in my head, which was you love your wife, you stay loving your wife, you win your wife back. But ultimately what it was I've created this horrendous broken world for this kid and I hate it and I don't know how to make it right. And I don't want what happened to me to happen to her. Oh, this is about me. And I got new eyes to see my old man because now I'm 22, going through a divorce, little tiny kid. Just thinking about it going like, oh, like my pain has dictated to me the story about my dad and why he wouldn't and why I don't know him and why he kind of started over with a new family. And I'm just sort of like stuck in between. And in that moment, I'm looking at and thinking, oh, my sweet little kid, I don't want this for you either. Oh no, I'm the villain in this story too. A lot of it was about me. I think you're right. I think you're more right even than you realize in terms of like, I think I was trying to manipulate the situation or trying to win it somehow. I was still trying to redeem it on my own terms. And there was a part of it that just, I hate saying this, but like it just needed to die. And I was not able to let it go for a really long time. And I caused way more suffering to myself than I ever needed to. That became almost like a new understanding that I had as I was preparing to begin what was like what has been and is and continues to be like honestly like the best relationship I've ever had in my whole. I love my wife so much. She's like the garden of God for me. Like she's the best thing ever. I was getting ready and I didn't know there was this very real sort of connection that developed in my life between me and Christ Jesus. I felt like I wanted a real relationship with him, you know, like I wanted that. And that was what I didn't want to settle for a book because I felt like I'd experienced something. And I knew, so that's kind of that's what brought me through those years. It was always that voice and that the presence. It felt like he was real. And that's what I wanted in my relationship to Jesus.
And I think that's what was so appealing to everyone around. I remember I've told the story many times, like the first time I heard you pray, you like dropped an F-bomb.
Oh God.
and then you followed it up with an S-bomb to show that you accidentally dropped an F-bomb anyway. But I think
the real deal, man.
And I think I remember you saying like, God, you know, and that became like, even though like you were just figuring it out, like you had a dynamic like relationship with Jesus, and that's what drew everybody in. It's not like the manufactured or maintained or, the show that draws people in, or keeping control. Even it was like a thing where it was like, dude, this guy loves Jesus, and just watch him struggle like in honesty with that.
That is so messed up. Oh, God,
listen though, Tommy, listen to me. That is where we're all at our best, in a sense, like where we're all just like, dude, this is where I'm really at. And this is what I'm really thinking, because you didn't have like the factory filters that a lot of pastors learn, because you were seeing like these punk rock kids come in and hardcore kids come in and just randoms come in. And they were like, for the first time maybe in their lives, open to hearing about Jesus, because it was so it was just so out there in a sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it was well, like I'm just saying from the what you would normally see, you'd have Ryan Gregson leading worship with a red light, with a blown out sound system, because we had so many shows there at Amethyst.
Everything was broken.
Everything was broken.
Holes in the wall, holes in the stage.
Holes in the wall, holes in the stage. People putting hands through the wall with the Star Wars on the wall. But it didn't matter. There was something. It started 20 minutes late on Sundays, always. But there was something really dynamic happening that was based on you coming to the end of like trying to keep it all. And you've always been an authentic guy, but this is where you were clearly like broken, and God was meeting you in that place. And you were like basically wanting to tell everyone what he has been doing.
It's true.
I mean, we had talked about probably breaking this into two parts, and of course we're going to, because this stuff is so like relatable, and I really want just, all these different aspects. I think that's like why God loves stories, and he doesn't omit the falls. It's like you get the valleys, you get the peaks, and because that grabs our attention, that people aren't perfect, and none of us have made it. We're all constantly trying to understand, who Jesus fully is. Every time I think I grasp who he is, I'm like, he's so much bigger. Mm-hmm. He's so much bigger than I think he is. I put him in a box. And that's an ongoing thing. But so in the next episode, we want to get into Sleeping Giant. We want to get into Runs Against Traffic. We want to get into Holy Name. Yeah. We want to get into everything that God has done in your life post this backstory of how God grabbed this punk rock misfit that's bounced around, that finds his place, that, is all these things. And for the listeners, thanks for sticking in there with us. Tommy, thank you for being vulnerable.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you guys for listening for so long. I talked so long. I
love it, man.
That's good. Oh, it's good stuff, man. Thanks for being so honest.
Hey, this Friday, the 17th, Holy Name is doing a live show that you can purchase tickets for. Tommy, where can people see this?
It's on a site called Veeps, VEEPS. And so it's a live stream performance that we filmed in Chicago. It's February 17th. I think it's 8 p.m. Eastern, and it's going to be up for, I think, 24 hours. So you can get it on Friday. If you're not right there, it's fine. It'll be up for a while so you can watch it. But from the comfort of the living room or from the safety of the internet, please check out our first ever performance. It'll be awesome.
Thanks for tuning into the Voyager podcast. If you'd like to reach out, you can reach us through Instagram at the Voyager Podcast or through contact@calvarycarlsbad.com. We hope this has been encouraging for you. Until next time.